it's autumn here in the United States where I live, and so what better time to talk about autumn leaves and this great arrangement from Cannonball Adderley with Sam Jones on bass. So let's take a close look at this essential bass line that is in the intro and talk a little bit more about some of the walking that Sam Jones is doing here. Let's check it out. Welcome to Learn Jazz Bass with Matt Rybicki. I'm glad that you're here. So Sam Jones, as I said, is playing bass on this amazing and seminal and very well-known album called Something Else from Cannonball Adderley, and Miles Davis is on trumpet on this one, although Cannonball Adderley is the leader, and Sam Jones has a lot of amazing stuff that he's playing on this record, which you should definitely check out. And this essential bass line is so-called, from my perspective, because so many people know this recording and know this arrangement that in many instances, this is a sort of go-to intro for Autumn Leaves. And so I thought, let's take a closer look at that intro itself, make sure we're familiar with it, and then also talk about some things that Sam is doing in his walking line and two feel and so on and so forth. So one thing that I wanted to bring to your attention from the very beginning is that the notes that are in this line that Sam is playing with the piano spell out a G minor 6 chord. And what's sort of interesting about that, or to bring your attention to the fact, is that technically, like in the key of G minor, the G natural minor, the relative major is B flat, like our key signature here is a B flat, and so you should have an E flat in chords that occur diatonically. A G minor 6 is spelled G, B flat, D, and E natural, which is not diatonic to the key. It's a great sound, totally usable and all that kind of stuff, but I just want to bring to your attention that, hey, this intro arpeggio doesn't actually sort of match the quality of the chords that are sort of technically diatonic to this particular key. But that said, those are the 4 notes that are involved, and that's it. It's pretty basic, but there's a couple things to notice about it. First of all, let's just talk about the fingering real quick. It starts on the low G here with your 4th finger, and then B flat with your 1st in Samandal half position. And then I'm playing open D, and then E natural with my 2nd finger. D natural again. G, B flat, D, E, D, and that's it. It's not difficult at all. One thing that I want to bring to your attention, though, is that the feeling of it, like the rhythmic feeling, is in this very weird gray space between swinging and straight. And in fact, if you listen carefully, listen to the very first measure when the tune starts, it's quite straight. And then from there on, it leans much more towards swinging. So at the very beginning, it's like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and... But really, that's not what they're doing after that first measure. They're sort of giving it a loping, swinging feeling, a little bit more towards that, but it's not quite exactly swinging. It's hard to duplicate, especially because they sort of shift a little bit here and there as far as like how much swing they're putting on it. The best thing to do is just listen a bunch of times and get familiar with it. And if you're going to do it as a pop-up arrangement, so to speak, on a gig, it doesn't really sort of matter very much. But I think it's important to know that it can go one of 2 ways. And they're sort of really straddling this line between straight and swing. And there's this compositional aspect too, or this arranging aspect of the song too, where that obviously, as you heard, goes on quite a while, but where the horns enter with what I call, or something that's called pads, so sort of long notes that are under the main sort of focus of the moment. Those are sort of their pads, the horns enter there, and then what is sometimes called stings are played after that. So it's more percussive, sharper, brighter, more prominent notes come out after that. So it's this sort of evokes to me a sort of sense of water moving and things sort of jumping, either laying on the water or jumping out of it and so on and so forth. So anyway, There's something to notice that this arrangement happens. You don't have to do that yourself, of course. The important thing is again to know what the actual line is. G, B flat, D, E natural, not E flat, which is in the key. And that's pretty much it. So when you are playing it yourself with somebody else and doing this arrangement, just keep your ears open, look at each other, try to connect with the other people, and should let somebody know, hey, we're about to start the head. If you don't do this exact arrangement, somebody's got to, let others know when the melody is going to start. Now that said, to that point, when we look at the Sam Jones transcription itself, we've got a whole chorus of two feel, which is great. Measure 17 through 48. A great two feel, which we'll talk about. But notice that in measure 49, the second time the chorus happens, there is this brief moment where Sam Jones is thinking to himself, are we still in two? Because he plays a half note on the downbeat. So he wasn't entirely clear that they were going to go to walking swing there in that measure, but he quickly assesses the situation with his ears, hears that they are going to a walking feel, and immediately switches to play beats 3 and 4. So that's just right there in front of us, an example of what can happen when we're not sure what's happening in the arrangement, right? So as far as the first couple pages of this, I want to bring to your attention, if you didn't see, that I took a little extra time in this particular instance to talk or to lay out what fingers and what strings to use. And this is a little bit unconventional as far as where one would place this stuff on a sheet. Oftentimes, instead of like calling it the A string, it would have a Roman numeral 3. This is the Roman numeral 1 G string. D is 2, 3A, and so on. So that would be like which string to play it on. And then usually fingerings tend to go above, oftentimes go above the note, but I wanted to preserve being able to see the chords above there. So I did this in the intro and then part of this two feel, just to give you an idea of like where to start and give you a leg up on playing the whole thing. This is a great two feel. In fact, I use it, many people use it as a beginning sort of sense of like how to introduce a two feel to students, because it is so simple and so perfect for what is happening in the moment. It doesn't require anything else. It's played with total command. The sound is amazing. The feel is amazing. And as you can see, there is absolutely nothing complicated here at all in what Sam Jones is playing. Rather, it's how he's playing it that's important. And those moments where there are just little bits of spice, where there's a little bit of an addition of approach notes, chromatic approach notes, and so on, a little bit of extra eighth notes to add some rhythmic interest and so on and so forth, that's important too. So thinking about it as a whole, as a sort of compositional thing, like this is his two feel for this chorus, it is in and of itself sort of an arrangement / composition, however you want to say it. It's great. So if you are trying to get your two feel together, copy this exactly. This is going to help you tremendously. And try to sound like him and have the feel of what he's doing, because the feel is really, really important, as I've mentioned many times. Let me bring your attention as well to a couple of harmonic things. So, this is a great example too for when, we get bogged down into looking at sheet music or looking at iReal Pro or looking at the real book is what I'm implying. They are not playing what's in any of those typical chord progressions. It's not that it's more complicated, it's that it's less complicated. For example, you'll see I have several places where I've got just chords in parentheses. That is what would be on a typical lead sheet there, like in example 40, in measure 40, every time in this form, typically people can play a E flat major 7 there. They do not do that in this instance. And so too do they ignore the typical progression that folks sort of learn at the beginning in measures 40, 42, 43, 44. There's typically more chords there, oftentimes like a descending, chromatic descending in the bass sound movement. Like if I go from measure 41, G, G flat, F, and then sometimes E natural, and then sometimes E flat's played there, or that's just the flat 5 of the A. So that they don't do that is the point. And in fact, they eliminate another sort of common thing to do as well, or at least I should say Sam eliminates a common thing in the B sections in what would be the second half of the tune. He is very typically not playing that A minor 7 flat 5, even though usually we play that chord there and it is part of a minor 2/5 that is going to the G minor in the third bar of section B. So he generally just plays D7 for those 2 bars. At least he's alluding to that. In many instances, you'll see it in pretty much all of these choruses that I've provided for you. So something of note there for sure. And I also want to bring your attention to something that has to do with note choices under chords. And I found it really tricky, as much as I love this album and I know it very well, and as experienced as I am with transcribing, I had a really hard time determining some of the lower notes that Sam was playing on certain sections of the form. For example, on page 3, this would be the third chorus, I think, or the second chorus. Every time there is an A minor 7 flat 5 and then a D7, like this minor 2/5 we're talking about, within the sort of form itself, there is different ways that Sam plays what would be the second degree of a scale in that moment. So if we look at measure 53, for example, he's playing, to my ears, best I can tell, he's playing A, B flat as the next note, and that's the second degree of some A minor scale. In B flat major, this relative major of this key, this would be the Locrian scale. And that makes sense with that. So he's playing this B flat is in the key. And then on D7, he's playing E flat on beat 2, and that is the second degree of a scale that is associated with a minor key. We'll just put it that way. But just notice the E flat is not the second degree of D major. That would be E major. That would be E natural. He's playing E flat there. So it's like a flat 9 on a D7. And then often he does keep that E flat, but there's a lot of sort of switching back and forth. If you look at measure 73 and 74, for example, here he's playing B natural instead of B flat and E natural instead of E flat in those instances. And then sometimes it is mixed up. In measure 61 and 62, he's got B natural on the A and he's got E flat on the D7. So he seems to be, again, if my transcription is accurate, I really hope it is, I tried. He seems to be sort of weaving in and out of options there. All are acceptable. I can't say exactly why he made those exact choices. I think all of them sound really good, but I think it's interesting to note that that exists there. One other cool thing I want to point out is that in measure 70, there's for whatever reason, great sounding thing that happens when I'll play from 69. 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's really like that B natural, it's going to be flat, chromatic approach note to B flat. That all makes sense, but kind of the fact that he's starting that idea going down and then he jumps up, F, C, B. You would normally go to B flat, but he's going F, C, B natural, B natural. Something about it, just that little extension of that chromatic movement gives it a little bit, as I say, of spice, of depth there in that moment. So that's a neat moment that I like to hear a lot. One more thing, a little bit of a pedantic thing about the way that I wrote out this notation. In this instance, I am using C flats and F flats, which are, to me, the edge of what's acceptable for reading, notation, like, especially in an improvised setting or in a jazz related setting, whatever, like when one can use the idea of when a line descends, you use a flat, and when it ascends, you use a sharp. when there is a non-diatonic note, some kind of accidental involved. If the line is going down, the two notes on the other side are, one is higher than the other, use a flat on that note that is out of place. And if it's going up, use a sharp. We try to keep to that because it helps the reader, whoever they may be able to tell what's coming next. It sort of telegraphs that idea, hey, we're going to continue down. But you run into trouble like this, where if you follow that all the time, you've got some really funky things in certain keys, double flats and so on and so forth, and double sharps, which is not easy to read for jazz players, for most anybody. I'm sure classical players don't love it either. Nonetheless, but in this instance, because the line isn't very complicated, and because the extreme ends is just F flat, which is the same note as E natural, and C flat, which is the same note as B natural, I've put it in here sort of purposely. The tempo is slow, the line isn't hard. Let's give us a chance to read some unusually flat, notated flat things. So it was purposeful, like, okay, this is not too hard. Let's expand our boundaries a little bit to read those things. Moving on to measure 89 and 90, he does this idea a couple times, and it's just a chromatic enclosure, but it sounds so good when he does it. Just the combination of his sound and his feel, and in this instance where it's slow and low and you can hear it well. If I play from 89, 1, 2, 3, 4. So he is encircling the F with G flat, E natural, F natural. Actually, you could call it a double chromatic approach downright, or double the enclosure or something. C, G, G flat, E, F. It just sounds so cool down that low. I love it. As I say, he does it a couple times. He also does a neat thing that I don't necessarily automatically go to myself in like measure 110 and 130, 138, 132, 150. He does this sort of idea where he is starting on the second degree of the scale that would be associated with the chord and descending down into the root. So if I play from 109 to 1, so one more time from 109. So great. I just love that sound. He also does it in as I say, 132. So I'll play 131 here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Something about that moment, I just love it. It's this little bit of suspense that sort of adds a little bit of that interest to the line. If we look also at chord qualities, there is a couple instances where he very well may, and it is totally acceptable, and tons of people do it, you are changing the quality of the G minor to G7 because the chord that comes after it is C minor. So basically you are preparing for that C minor by playing its fifth. Its dominant chord would be G7. So that G minor chord changes to a G7. And this is something we talk about in the course that I'm doing, Jazz Bass 101. It's a 5-part course. Actually, there's five courses within this one sort of big structure. We talk about this in that too, so check that out if you would. Nonetheless, preparing for that C minor to come is a very common thing. There is a question though for me in measure 128, and this is to me was the crux of my problem confirming this transcription, is that moment. It is very clear what those B's are. Are they B naturals or B flats? Very, very possible they're just played slightly out of tune. Intonation is an issue for all of us. It also kind of sounds a little bit like he almost slides as he moves his hand, like G, something like that, G, and then he starts on the B flat and sort of moves his hand a little bit into the B natural. So I'm not really sure if his intention there in 128, for example, was G7 with what sounds like two B naturals to me, because that doesn't really make sense going to the B section. So my guess there is it's actually more a mistake, but I notated as best what I could actually hear. In measure 153, I just wanted to point out, as I have done before, talked about moments of tension that can be created in bass lines that are a lot of fun to play and release and let go when that moment happens. And here's a little moment of something that, like, I usually talk about Ray Brown doing this, but here's a little moment of tension that is released by Sam. He's just playing these C's in octaves. He plays 1, 2, 3, 4. Especially in context, that sounds more more fraught than it does when I play it right here. I think because we're coming from a whole bunch of walking, then all of a sudden there's this moment of static that's released by not only changing chords and going to then a moving line, but it also has this drop of octave from this C on the G string to the open E. That's a pretty strong statement right there. And so I really dig that a lot. So hopefully that was a little bit of an interesting dive into some of what Sam is playing on this tune. There's a lot more. This is only about halfway through the whole length of the tune, but it is a masterpiece and something all of us should know. So I really suggest you check it out. And if nothing else, be sure you know that intro to play with your friends or when you're on a gig and so on and so forth. So thanks for joining me today. As always, I hope it was helpful. Please look below for a PDF and for links to other stuff, including my new course. And thanks for coming. Always remember, straight ahead and strive for tone.